112 ascents of Mont Blanc, all 14 8,000ers, climbed without supplemental oxygen, decades spent on the planet's deadliest mountains. Roger Payne, Erhard Loretan, Ermanno Salvaterra, legends who taught others how to survive. And yet, they all died. Not on some distant Himalayan face, but in the Alps, the mountains they knew like the back of their hand. The Matterhorn, Mont Blanc, the Grand Jorasses, the Dolomites. For a century and a half, these peaks have claimed the best of the best. This is a story of 8 of them, a story where experience, skill, and flawless preparation proved powerless. And it all comes down to one question. Why? Mario Castiglioni knows these mountains. He knows them intimately. He's 59, an internationally certified mountain guide, and after 30 years in the business, his track record speaks for itself. 3 Himalayan 8,000ers, Manaslu, Cho Oyu, Shishapangma, the technical walls of Patagonia, Fitzroy, Cerro Torre, routes on El Capitan in Yosemite, 4 of the 7 summits. For his clients, this is what matters. They're with a man who has been to places most climbers don't even dream of going. Originally from Como in northern Italy, Castiglioni has built his entire life around the mountains. With his wife, Kalina Damjanova, a Bulgarian ski instructor and certified tour guide who speaks 5 languages fluently, he runs the MLG Mountain Guide Company out of Chiasso, Switzerland. Kalina is the face of the company. She's warm, outgoing, and connects easily with clients. Mario is different. A man of few words, physically powerful, calm under pressure. He doesn't entertain the group. He leads it. On the mountain, his decisions are final. Kalina is a certified tour guide, but not a mountain guide. There's no debate about who's in charge. In April of 2018, 8 experienced ski tourers hire MLG for a 6-day trip along the Haute Route, the legendary high-altitude ski traverse from Chamonix to Zermatt across the Swiss Alps. It's a strong group, an architect from Milan, a 20-year member of the Alpine Club, a woman who had summited Aconcagua just the year before, a pair of seasoned climbers from Bolzano, and a 72-year-old Swiss man who'd skied this very route half a century ago. They aren't hiring a guide because they don't know their way around the mountains. They need someone to handle the logistics, booking the huts, planning the stages, monitoring the weather. They can handle the rest themselves. The first 3 days prove they made the right choice. The weather is perfect. The route goes according to plan. By the evening of the 3rd day, the group arrives at the Cabane de Dix hut, at an altitude of 2,928 meters. Ahead lies the 4th stage, the highest and most exposed section of the entire Haute Route. But on this section, everything depends on the weather. The Cabane de Dix sits on a rocky hill surrounded by glaciers, and on the evening of April 28th, every group in the hut is looking at the same forecast on an iPad, the only source of weather data there. The forecast is clear. The foehn wind is ending, to be replaced by a strong southerly wind, heavy snow, and a sharp drop in temperature. One of the French guides says it plainly, "Not in this weather." That evening, there's another mountain guide in the hut, an American named Steve House, one of the most famous climbers of his generation. He's leading 2 clients on the same route. House has been tracking the forecast all week, and what he sees leaves no room for doubt. Tomorrow, it's going to be genuinely dangerous up high. But he has a plan. After dinner, while his clients rest, House climbs 800 meters up to the Pina d'Orola Pass and records a GPS track of the route, point by point. His friend, a French guide named Simon Duvernay, gives him a track for the descent to the Vignettes hut, recorded just 2 weeks earlier. House would later say it bluntly. Without a reliable GPS track, he wouldn't have even tried. Castiglioni, however, spends his evening differently. He doesn't go up for a recon. He doesn't record a track. He doesn't call the Vignettes hut, even though the huts are connected by a phone line, and a single call would have revealed that the storm had already hit their destination in full force. In the morning, he cancels their reservation at the more distant Nakamuli hut and changes their objective to Vignettes, closer, but still over the summit of Pina d'Orola, the highest point on the Haute Route at 3,796 meters. He doesn't discuss the day's plan with the group, nor the alternatives, nor the conditions that would force them to turn back. The group learns the route that morning and simply accepts it. That's what they hired a professional for. Most of the groups at Caben de Dix decide to stay put or descend into the valley to the village of Arola. Only 3 groups set out. House leaves first, followed by a team of 4 French ski tourers without a guide. Castiglioni and his group of 10 are the last to leave at 6:30 in the morning. 2 guides read the same forecast, stayed in the same hut, and were heading for the same route. One spent the evening preparing for the worst, the other did not. The difference between them would become clear in just a few hours. For now, the morning of April 29th begins as if the forecast was wrong. The sky is partly cloudy, the wind is light, and visibility is excellent. The group descends from the hut's terrace, crosses the Chalon Glacier, and begins the long ascent towards Payne de Rolla. They take pictures of each other against the backdrop of white peaks. There is no hint of the catastrophe to come. Around 9 a.m., all 3 groups approach the Serpentine, a steep, icy section with a 300-meter vertical drop. It's the bottleneck of the route, and also the last point from which a safe retreat to the valley is possible. Above it lies the exposed Col du Brenet Plateau, at over 3,000 meters, with nowhere to take shelter. Descending the Serpentine in a storm, a 40-degree slope on sheer ice, is virtually impossible. House sees the cloud front moving in from the south. Castiglioni decides to continue the ascent. With that decision, the door behind them closes. At 10 o'clock, the phone storm hits the plateau, 4 hours earlier than predicted. In a matter of minutes, visibility drops to just a few meters. The wind gusts up to 80 kilometers per hour. The world around the group becomes a solid white wall. At 10:37 a.m., following the track he recorded the day before, House is already standing on the summit of the Payne de Rolla. Soon, he'll be descending to the hut to spend a warm evening. His day is done. And at that very moment, Castiglioni's GPS phone and GPS watch stop working. 10 people at over 3,000 meters are left with no navigation, no visibility, and no way back. Piccioli pulls out his Garmin eTrex and sees it immediately. The group is heading in the wrong direction. He approaches the guide and offers his help. Castiglioni's response, "I know where I'm going." Some time passes before he finally agrees to look at Piccioli's screen. But the Garmin is only loaded with summer routes, which don't match the winter trails. The device shows their position on the map, but it can't point them to a safe path. From this point on, the group moves across the plateau almost at random. The GPS data from Piccioli's Garmin would later allow investigators to reconstruct every step. 10 people circling the exposed plateau for 6 hours, losing their way again and again. Instead of a direct ascent to the Payne de Rolla Pass, they go the wrong way from the start and wander in circles on the Col du Brenet, losing time, energy, and warmth. Somewhere in that white chaos, the group is found by 4 French ski tourers, 2 married couples from Tignes, experienced skiers traveling without a guide, using maps and compasses. They've lost their bearings too, and decide to stick with the people who at least have a GPS. Castiglioni is now leading 14 people. Between 11 a.m. and noon, the group finally reaches the summit pass. The wind here is so strong that stopping is impossible. Lunch is canceled, thermoses stay in their packs. Castiglioni makes a decision meant to make the descent safer. Everyone takes off their skis and puts on crampons. They'll continue on foot. It's easier to keep the group together this way, harder for anyone to get separated. But it comes at a price. The descent, which would take 30 to 60 minutes on skis, will now stretch on for hours. Castiglioni ties a rope to his waist and drags the end through the snow behind him. The only landmark for the 13 people following in visibility of about 2 meters. Piccioli is up front, trying to navigate by his Garmin screen. Somewhere below them on the slope, there's a passage to the hut, a narrow gap in the rocks, 3 or 4 meters wide, marked by a stone cairn. It's the only safe way down. To the left is a sheer drop. Finding this passage in good weather is easy. In a whiteout, it's nearly impossible. The group never finds it. Hour after hour, 14 people wander above the passage, unaware that it's right below them. By evening, a thunderstorm slams into the mountain. Wind gusts reach 150 kilometers per hour. The snow is blowing horizontally. No one in the group has eaten or had anything to drink for almost a full day. Around 7:30 in the evening, Castiglioni says the words that mean it's over. "We're staying here. We're making a bivouac." Luciano Cattori, the 72-year-old Swiss man, hears this and replies bluntly, "If we stay here, we'll all die." But to keep moving in the dark, in a hurricane-force wind with zero visibility, is also a death sentence. There are no choices left. Castiglioni takes out his satellite phone, the last hope for outside help. The battery is dead. Whether he checked the charge before leaving the cabane de decks is unknown. It doesn't matter now. The group is cut off from the outside world until dawn. The spot where darkness finds them is a rocky ledge at 3,270 meters. It's a south-facing slope, and the wind is hammering them from the south, a hurricane scouring the snow down to bare rock. Under a thin white layer is just ice and stone. Digging a proper shelter is impossible. Piccioli tries. With his shovel, he scrapes out a shallow pit behind a rock, but it's too small and offers no protection from the wind. They place the three women there, Francesca, Elisabetta, and Gabriella. Their bodies are already at their limit. The mylar emergency blankets, a standard piece of gear for every member, are useless. The wind rips them from their hands in an instant. Piccioli doesn't even bother taking his out. It's pointless. To take off your gloves to fix something means losing your hands to frostbite in minutes. The group breaks apart into small islands. Kalina goes off to find shelter among the rocks, alone. The four French climbers head 40 meters higher up the slope and find a niche where the wind is slightly weaker. Marcello, Andrea, Luciano, and Castiglioni huddle together behind the nearest rocks. Julia and the German woman, Hruska, cram themselves into a crevasse, 550 meters. That's all that separates them from the vignette's hut. On a clear day, it's a 10-minute walk. Right now, behind the stone walls of the hut, the lights are on, the heat is running. Steve House and his group are having dinner, completely unaware that outside, beyond a wall of blizzard, 14 people are stranded without shelter, without communication, and with no path to safety. Piccioli sits down with his back against a rock, pulling his knees to his chest, curling into the smallest possible shape his body can make. Every square inch of skin touching the snow means losing heat he can't afford to lose. He knows the rule from mountaineering courses, from books he read long before this night. If you fall asleep, hypothermia will take you, and you will never wake up. That means he has to move. Not standing, not walking. He no longer has the strength for that. Small movements, hands, feet, just enough to keep his heart pumping blood. He shouts to the German woman sitting a few meters away, "Don't fall asleep, keep moving." She hears him and responds with a movement. Between them, there's only darkness and the roar of the wind, making it almost impossible to be heard. Late in the night, Piccioli gets up and checks on the three women in a small hollow behind the rock. What he sees leaves no doubt. All three are in critical condition. He goes to Castiglioni. He proposes a plan. Find Kalina's shelter, if it's any better, and the two of them will drag the women there. Castiglioni answers quietly. He can't see anything. The wind and snow have damaged his eyes. He's blind. The guide who led 14 people through the mountains can now no longer see his own hands. Some more time passes. Piccioli sees Castiglioni for the last time, sitting with his backpack still strapped on. What happens after that, none of the survivors know. In the morning, rescuers will find the guide's body at the foot of a steep slope below their bivouac. The leading theory is that, blinded, he tried to descend to the hut alone, to reach people, to raise the alarm, to save those he had led up this mountain, and fell from a cliff in the darkness. Piccioli returns to his rock. 2 or 3 times during the night, he's ready to let go, to stop moving, stop fighting, and just close his eyes. He would later say, "In moments like that, you don't think about yourself. It's strange, but on the very edge, you think about others, about your wife, your mother, about how you can't do this to them." And that thought is the only thing that keeps him from giving up. At dawn, the wind begins to die down. Piccioli pries open his eyelids, which he'd kept shut against the snow all night. The sky is gray, but there's visibility. He stands up and looks around. Several people are lying face down, covered in snow. He shifts his gaze across the valley and sees the hut. It's standing on a ridge on the other side of the slope, a stone building with dark windows, motionless, as if nothing had happened. Piccioli looks down and realizes he can't make it there on his own. But then the German woman, who survived the night next to him, spots movement, the figures of skiers heading out from the hut on their morning route. Piccioli stands up to his full height and screams. All he has left is his voice. "Help! Help! Help!" The skiers stop, gathering together in a group. They heard him. 15 minutes later, the first helicopter appears over the slope, then a second and a third. 7 aircraft from Air Glaciers, Air Zermatt, and Rega launched the largest rescue operation the region has seen in years. Rescuers reach the rocky ledge and find what Piccioli could no longer see in the dark. Castiglioni is lying at the base of the cliff below the bivouac. He's dead. Kalina is dead. Elisabetta, Gabriella, Marcello, Andrea, bodies in the snow, victims of hypothermia. Francesca von Felten, a mother of 3 who had summited Aconcagua the year before, is airlifted to a hospital in the canton of Valais. She will die 3 days later, the 7th and final victim. Of Castiglioni's group, 3 survive: Piccioli, Cattori, and Hruska. All 4 of the French climbers who took shelter higher up survive. The Valais prosecutor's office will open an investigation and confirm. The group was properly equipped. The guide had a rope, a satellite phone, a GPS watch, and a GPS phone. Everything either failed or ran out of battery. Meteorologists would later show that the forecast was accurate, the deteriorating weather predictable. The guides who stayed at the Vignettes hut that same morning had descended into the valley without a word of discussion. The danger was that obvious. 1 route, 1 day, 1 forecast. Those who prepared for the worst made it through. Those who relied on experience were left on the slope, 550 meters from the warmth, the light, and the rescue that never came in time. He'd climbed Mont Blanc 112 times. He taught avalanche safety. He knew this slope like the back of his hand. On the morning of July 12, 2012, Roger Payne was leading 2 clients up the most popular route in the Western Alps. It was the same route he'd descended 8 years earlier, after a first ascent of his own. They were just minutes away from the safety of the col. So, how did the one man who knew better than anyone how snow can kill fail to save himself? And could this tragedy have been prevented? There are some people who know the mountains so well, their very presence feels like a guarantee of safety. Roger Payne was one of those people. He grew up in Hammersmith, West London, and found his way to the mountains through the Scouts. First came Scotland, then the crags of England and Wales, and finally, the Alps. Starting in 1977, he went back every single summer without fail, for 35 consecutive years. In 1983, Roger earned a degree in education and, at the same time, his IFMGA Mountain Guide certification, the highest international standard in the profession. From that moment on, the mountains weren't just a passion, they were his job. He moved to Lace in Switzerland and began to build a career that would eventually extend far beyond just guiding clients to summits. Roger became a certified avalanche safety instructor. He professionally taught others to recognize mortal danger in the snow, explaining how slabs form, how to read a slope, when to turn back. In parallel, he became the head of the British Mountain Guides and served as the General Secretary of the British Mountaineering Council, the BMC. He took part in over 20 major expeditions: K2, Changabong, Gasher Broom, Pik Pobedi, Nanda Devi East, the mountains of Sikkim and China. A new expedition every year, often with his wife, Julianne Klima, a guide from New Zealand and his constant rope partner. He summited Mont Blanc 112 times, mostly as a guide. In the mountain community, he was known as one of the safest climbers around. His colleagues would have trusted him with their lives without a moment's hesitation. That's why what happened on July 12, 2012, was such a profound shock to everyone who knew him. Just 4 days shy of his 56th birthday, Roger Payne was killed in an avalanche. The avalanche that killed him broke on a route he had traveled dozens of times. Summer 2012. Roger is working as a guide in the Alps, a typical high season. 2 clients hire him: John Taylor, 48, a housing company director from York, and Steve Barber, 47, his neighbor. They lived on the same street in the village of Upper Poppleton. Both were keen, experienced climbers. John had already been up Mont Blanc twice. The goal was the same: Mont Blanc, the highest point in Western Europe, at 4,808 meters. Roger chose the Trois Monts route, the Three Summits. It's the most popular of the four standard routes on Mont Blanc, leading from the Cosmique's hut over Mont Blanc de Tacoul and Mont Maudit to the main summit. During peak season, up to 80 people a day pass through here. Roger knew every meter of it. In 2004, after a first ascent of a new route on the south face of Mont Blanc, this is exactly where he descended, down the north face of Mont Maudit, down that very same slope. The danger of this section is no secret. Avalanches are a regular occurrence here. In 2008, 8 climbers died on this same slope. Every professional guide in Chamonix knows this. And every season, they continue to lead clients this way. Because the route isn't closed, because the risk is considered acceptable, because with the right timing, the statistical probability of getting caught in an avalanche is low. In the first days of July 2012, there had been some early summer snowfalls. By the 11th, the weather had settled and the sky had cleared. No official avalanche warnings were issued. The mayor of Chamonix would confirm this publicly after the tragedy. That night, about 28 climbers from several different countries set out on the route, a normal summer night on Mont Blanc. 28 people set out into the darkness for the same reason. The slope is safer at night. It's the ABC of alpine tactics. An early start is one of the few tools a guide can control on an objectively dangerous route. At night, the snow is firmer, the cold temperatures keep the slabs from shifting, and the sérac is less active. The earlier you leave, the better your chances of clearing the danger zone before the sun begins to warm the slope. Roger knew this rule better than anyone. He taught it himself. The group spends the night at the Cosmique's hut, at an altitude of 3,613 meters. They set out around 1:30 in the morning. In the dark, headlamps on, several rope teams begin the ascent almost simultaneously. The route is standard, the pace is steady. Ahead lies the crossing of Mont Blanc de Tacoul, then the traverse to Mont Maudit. By 5 in the morning, the groups are reaching the north face of Mont Maudit. Altitude, around 4,000 meters. They are on the lower part of a steep section, right below the séracs, massive overhanging blocks of ice. This is the exact spot where 8 people died in 2008. They are minutes away from the safety of the col. According to experts who later reconstructed the timeline, the groups were just a few steps from being out of the risk zone. The sky is getting lighter, the weather is clear, no signs of danger. What happened next, the survivors all described the same way. There was no sound, no warning. Over the preceding days, the wind had been methodically redepositing fresh snow on the north face of Mont Maudit. Layer by layer, it formed what climbers call a wind slab, a dense, brittle sheet of snow about 40 centimeters thick, lying on top of a weak underlying layer. From the outside, the slope looks fine. Inside, it's like a pane of glass resting on sand. Wind slabs are a rarity in the summer. That's what makes them so hard to predict. They don't groan or crack beforehand. They hold until the first impact, and then they shatter instantly, sweeping away everything on the slope. At around 5:20 in the morning, one of the climbers higher up struck the snow with an ice axe. According to the main theory of the investigation, that was all it took. The slab broke off and slid down, right onto the slope where several rope teams were standing. The speed of an avalanche on this kind of terrain can reach up to 60 kilometers per hour. There's no escaping it on an open slope. Roger Payne, John Taylor, and Steve Barber were killed. Along with them, 6 other climbers from Germany, Spain, and Switzerland. 9 others were injured and evacuated by helicopter to the hospital in Sallanches. The official cause of the avalanche was never definitively closed. The theory of a climber triggering it and the theory of a sérac collapse exist in parallel. The British guide Stuart MacDonald, director of the Avalanche Academy in Chamonix, put it bluntly, "It doesn't matter what the trigger was. We know for a fact the snow was unstable." The alarm was raised with the Chamonix PGHM at around 5:25 in the morning. Helicopters were dispatched immediately. Rescuers from the Italian Aosta Valley joined the operation, standard procedure on this section of the border. Among those who came to help was Victor Saunders, a British climber who had been on K2 with Roger back in 1993. Almost 20 years later, he found himself working in the debris field on the slope where his old rope partner had died. Several climbers were initially listed as missing. By evening, they were all accounted for. They had managed to descend via the French Haute Route before the avalanche hit, and had no idea what had happened behind them. The final toll: 9 dead, 9 injured. 3 Britons, 2 Germans, 2 Spaniards, 1 or 2 Swiss. The mayor of Chamonix called it one of the deadliest avalanches in the region in recent years. The British ambassador to France told reporters that the climbers had done nothing reckless and that there had been no signs of danger. That is the truth. And therein lies the heart of what happened on Mont Maudit. Roger Payne did everything right. He chose a proven route, set out at the right time, and knew every meter of the way. The man who professionally taught others how to survive avalanches didn't die because of a mistake. He died because he was simply in the wrong place at the one moment the slope decided to let go. In 2016, 3 more people died on the same section of Mont Maudit. The route remains open to this day. 82 summits in a single winter. It sounds like a challenge thrown down to the mountain gods themselves. April 2004. For Patrick Bérhault, a legend of mountaineering, this wasn't just a challenge. It was his magnum opus, the greatest work of his life. He wasn't just an athlete, he was an artist. For him, the mountains were a canvas, and his route, a poem. His goal was immense, almost unimaginable, to climb all 82 4,000-meter peaks of the Alps in a single winter. And to do it in the purest style, no machines. Just his own 2 feet, skis, and an unbreakable will, linking one icy summit to the next in a single, continuous line. Over 3 grueling months, he and his partner, Philippe Magnin, conquered 67 peaks. 67. The finish line was just visible through a haze of exhaustion and blowing snow. They crossed glaciers, slept in tiny huts, and faced the elements every single day. This wasn't a competition, it was a pilgrimage, a dialogue with the mountains in their own language. Every step was a battle against fatigue, against the biting wind, against the doubts that whispered it was time to stop. But they didn't stop. And then, April 28th, the Swiss Alps greeted them with a deceptively bright sun. Another route on their way to the summit of the Matterhorn. It was difficult, but for them, it was almost routine. Bérhault, as always, led the way. He was the leader, the one who broke the trail through the white silence, reading the terrain like an open book. He moved along a sharp, snowy ridge, with thousands of feet of empty space below. One step, then another. Suddenly the world fractured. The snow cornice he was standing on collapsed with a deafening crack. A chasm opened up beneath his feet. And just like that, the most ambitious and personal project in the life of one of the greatest climbers of his time became his final chapter. To understand what the mountains lost that day, we need to go back, to understand who this man really was. Patrick Bérhault represents an entire era. For generations of climbers, he was an icon, a guiding star. In the 80s, when rock climbing suddenly became cool, he was a true rock star. Along with his friend, Patrick Edlinger, they were the 2 musketeers of the vertical world. Their style, their freedom, their disregard for convention changed the sport forever. They turned climbing into an art form, accessible to anyone willing to answer the call of the rock. But for a great artist, any stage eventually feels too small. The publicity, the competitions, the same old routes, it all began to weigh on him. Patrick felt he was losing the most important thing, his sincere connection with nature. So, he walked away. Away from the fame and the crowds, into the great mountains, into the icy silence of the Alps and the Himalayas. There, at altitude, he found his true philosophy. He championed a very particular style, not a fight with the mountain, not a conquest or a victory. Harmony, movement. He saw an ascent not as an athletic feat, but as a dance. Bérhault even called himself a climber dancer. He didn't seek out the most difficult routes, but the most beautiful and elegant lines. For him, the mountain was a partner, and he strove to move with it in a single rhythm, smoothly and lightly, leaving almost no trace. And here's the striking paradox. This poet and artist of the mountains was known for being an incredibly cautious and methodical professional. Every step was calculated, every move considered, every risk weighed. His friends used to joke that he wore both a belt and suspenders. And so, this grand project, the traverse of 82 peaks, became the culmination of his life, the embodiment of his philosophy. It wasn't a sport, it was a pure journey. A single unbroken line drawn across the map of the Alps. A perfect dance, one winter long. In the winter of 2004, this grand dance began. Patrick's partner was Philippe Magnin, an experienced mountain guide. A project like this requires more than just a strong partner. It needs a kindred spirit, someone who breathes in the same rhythm as you. And Magnin was exactly that. For 3 months, their home became tiny alpine huts or a tent, shivering in the icy wind. They went for weeks without descending into the valleys, completely immersing themselves in the world of high altitude. This wasn't just a series of climbs, it was life on a glacier, where every day was a new challenge. It was a colossal endurance marathon, a test at the very limit of human capability. Imagine, you wake up in the cold every day, melt snow for tea, then strap on dozens of pounds of gear and head up into the sky. Thousands of feet of elevation gain, ice walls, snowfields under a blazing sun, or in a freezing blizzard. Muscles burn with fire, sleep becomes a luxury, and calories are incinerated at an incredible rate. By the end of April, after 3 months of this relentless work, the fatigue that builds up in the body isn't just tiredness. It's a total exhaustion that seeps into every cell, slowing your thoughts, dulling your instincts. The vigilance that had saved them dozens of times on the most difficult routes inevitably begins to falter. It's at this exact moment that the spring Alps become especially treacherous. Spring in the mountains is a time of hidden threats. The warm April sun, so welcome down below, becomes a dangerous ally at altitude. It weakens the glaciers and snow slopes, creating unstable sections and those very same treacherous cornices. It's an objective risk, one that can't be controlled 100%. The finish line is so close, it feels like you could reach out and touch it. But it's this final stretch when strength is failing and nature is playing by its own rules. That proves to be the most dangerous leg of the entire marathon. The morning of April 28th. The high-altitude air is crisp with cold and anticipation. Patrick Bérhault and Philippe Magnin set out on a route that should add 2 more jewels to their collection. The summits of the Matterhorn and the Dome, their 68th and 69th objectives on their grand list. The Dome is a giant, the highest mountain located entirely within Switzerland. To summit it as part of this traverse was a matter of honor. The weather is favorable, but the mountains live by their own laws. After the long winter, the snow hasn't yet found its spring stability. It holds hidden traps that even the most experienced eye cannot read. They move along a narrow ridge, sharp as a blade, covered in snow. The altitude is around 4,400 meters. Here, every breath is an effort, and the world below seems like a distant, unreal picture. Around them is the entire panorama of the Valais Alps, a grand theater of ice and rock. It feels as if they are alone in the universe, 2 tiny silhouettes against the backdrop of eternity. Patrick Bérhault, as the more experienced leader of the pair, goes first. He breaks the trail, literally probing every inch of snow with his ice axe and boots. His movements are fluid and precise, like a dancer on a stage. For them, this is routine. Step, plant the ice axe, shift weight. Over 3 months, their bodies had become perfect machines, having performed these motions thousands of times. The rhythm of their breathing, the crunch of snow under their crampons, the slight tension on the rope connecting them, it all became the familiar music of their ascent. And in this monotony lies the greatest danger. When the brain, exhausted by altitude and fatigue, switches to autopilot, intuition can fall silent at the worst possible moment. They are simply moving toward their goal, just as they had done 67 times before. Around noon, the sun is high, bathing the icy slopes in a blinding light. Patrick takes a step, and then another. A normal, 1,000 times repeated movement. In that same instant, the snow ridge beneath his feet ceases to exist. It simply vanishes, as if a trap door had opened beneath him. The snow cornice, that treacherous trap of the spring mountains, collapses with a deep rumble, pulling the climber with it into a 600-meter abyss. For Philippe Magnin, walking behind, the world explodes at a single point, his belay system. A powerful, inhuman jolt yanks him from his rhythm. The rope, their shared lifeline, becomes a steel cable trying to pull him off the slope after his friend. He's ripped from the ridge, his feet losing their purchase. But his body, trained for years, reacts before his mind can process the horror. In an instinctive, desperate motion, he drives his ice axe with his full weight into the dense spring snow. The screech of metal, a spray of ice crystals, and a miracle. Incredibly, he manages to stop the fall, holding the entire weight of his fallen partner. He freezes, pressed into the slope, in the most precarious and dangerous position imaginable. His heart is pounding somewhere in his throat. His lungs burn for air. The rope, leading down over the lip of the rock, is stretched as tight as a wire, humming with the strain. He screams, "Patrick! Patrick!" But the only answer is the whistle of the wind in the rocks. No cry, no groan, not the slightest sound. Just a deafening, icy silence. The silence at 4,400 meters. Philippe Magnin knows. Every second counts. He acts quickly, like a machine. At the limit of his strength, in an unstable position, he manages to build a solid anchor and fix the rope, freeing himself from the monstrous tension. His hands are shaking, but his mind is cold. At 12:30, he pulls out his phone and dials the number for rescue services. His voice breaks, but he clearly reports the coordinates and what has happened. The Swiss Air Zermatt helicopter arrives with astonishing speed. Its red dot appears against the blue sky, offering a fragile hope. But the mountains are against them today. Powerful gusts of wind toss the machine from side to side, preventing the pilot from getting close to the steep slope. The blades roar as they slice through the air, but the helicopter hangs helplessly at a distance. From the aircraft, rescuers scan the face, but they can't see Patrick or any sign of his fall. They can't even evacuate Magnin from his dangerous position. It's too risky. For Philippe, the hardest moment arrives. Over the radio, he is given an order. Descend alone to a safer place. He has to leave his friend down there, in the unknown, and save his own life. It's a soul-crushing decision, but there's no other choice. The search for Patrick Bérhault is postponed. Bad weather completely closes in on the mountains, making any operation impossible. Only on the following day, when the wind has died down, are rescuers able to descend to the base of the wall. There, among the debris of ice and snow, they find his body. The official conclusion was a tragic accident, the sudden and unpredictable collapse of a snow cornice. The news hit the climbing community like an avalanche. The death of Patrick Bérhault, that cautious, methodical dancer, was a shock, sparking a long and bitter conversation about the limits of risk, limits that exist even for the greatest masters of their craft. He's roped to his partner, 4,000 meters up a sheer wall with absolutely no chance of finding shelter. It's February 1971, the north face of the Grandes Jorasses in the Alps. In the world of mountaineering, it's known simply as the wall, a killer wall that decides who gets to live and who stays behind forever. And right now, it's passing judgment. 2 French climbers have been trapped on this vertical glacier for nearly 2 weeks now. Their daring plan to forge a new, incredibly difficult route in the dead of winter is turning into a slow, drawn-out agony. A hurricane-force storm is raging around them, and this isn't just snow and wind. It's a solid, roaring torrent of ice crystals that knocks you off your feet, scours your face, and gets under every layer of clothing. But falling isn't an option. You're hanging by a rope. The temperature plummeted below minus 30 degrees long ago. Every breath burns the lungs. Their food ran out days ago. But the worst part? Their fuel is gone. The small stove, their only source of warmth, their lifeline, has gone dark. They can no longer melt snow for water. The body begins to shut down. And now, one of them can't take it anymore. He goes quietly, without a fight, simply freezing to death in his harness. His partner is left alone. But not entirely. He's still tied to the man who will never leave this mountain. He's forced to look at the silent body that, just hours ago, was his friend and his only hope. He will spend 342 hours on this wall, almost 15 days, in a frozen hell, alone with the silence and the wind. When this story is over, it will become more than just a hymn to the human will to live. It will shake all of France and turn into one of the loudest and most bitter scandals in the history of mountaineering. This man's name is René de Maison. In the world of alpinism, he isn't just a star, he's a legend. the living embodiment of perseverance and will. His style is all about power, uncompromising, almost primal. Where other climbers look for elegant solutions or easier lines, de Maison plows straight through, like an icebreaker shattering a frozen sea. He trusts only in his own strength and endurance, and the mountains, it seems, return the favor. But away from the vertical world, down in the Chamonix Valley, he has a very different reputation. Here, he's a rebel, an outcast, a man you'd better not cross. His conflict with the mountaineering establishment is an open wound. It all started back in 1966. During a complex rescue operation on another famous face, de Maison went against the system. He ignored a direct order from the leadership of the Chamonix Guides Association, the most influential and prestigious organization of its kind in the world. While officials in warm offices decided a rescue was impossible and too risky, de Maison gathered his own team and did the impossible. He saved the climbers, but in doing so, he signed his own death warrant. For insubordination, he was disgracefully expelled from the association. For a professional guide, it was a lifelong stain on his name. From that moment on, René de Maison became an outsider in his own home. Official organizations ignored him. Many former colleagues turned their backs. He proved he was right on the rock faces, pulling off one daring ascent after another. But to the elite, he remained an upstart, a rule breaker. This rift, this invisible war between one man and the entire system, would become the trigger that turned a rescue operation into a national drama. Because now, in February of 1971, it isn't just any climber dying on the icy slopes of the Grandes Jorasses. The man dying up there is the #1 enemy of the Chamonix Guides Association. And when they kick you out the door, there's only one way to prove you're right. Do what everyone else says is impossible. In the winter of 1971, René de Maison puts everything on the line. His target is the Grandes Jorasses, the Walker Spur, but not the classic well-trodden route. He's aiming for a new line, straight as an arrow to the summit. It's one of the last great unsolved problems in the Alps, a challenge no one before him had dared to take on in winter. To climb this route would be to write his name in history forever, to silence all his critics with a single act. He chooses a young but incredibly strong climber, Serge Gusseau, as his partner. Serge is younger, and he looks up to de Maison with admiration. For him, this isn't just a climb. It's a chance to ascend to Olympus alongside his idol. He's ready to follow René anywhere, even into the heart of a winter storm. On February 10th, they start the climb. The weather is perfect. The air is cold and crisp, and there isn't a cloud in the deep blue, almost black, high-altitude sky. Their plan is audacious, but, they believe, realistic. A fast, alpine-style assault. Minimal gear, maximum speed. They expect to be done in 5 or 6 days, as long as the weather window holds. For the first few days, everything goes according to plan. The pair works like a single machine. The ring of ice axes, the crunch of crampons on frozen rock, short commands immediately snatched away by the wind into the abyss. They move confidently up the complex terrain. This isn't just a climb. It's a game of vertical chess, where every single move has to be perfectly calculated. Overhanging cornices, smooth granite slabs coated in a thin, treacherous glaze of ice. Step by step, they conquer the mountain, meter by meter. The Chamonix Valley, the center of all their conflicts and grievances, shrinks to a tiny speck far below. Up here on the wall, there is only them, their goal, and the ringing silence of the heights. But the mountains don't forgive optimism. Around the 6th day, with only a couple of 100 meters left to the summit, the heavens open up. The weather forecast turns out to be a fatal mistake. A storm of monstrous force slams into the face. Sky and earth blur into a single, roaring torrent of white. The wind knocks them off balance, trying to rip them from the wall and cast them into the void. The snow is blinding, forcing its way under their clothes, instantly melting from their body heat, and then freezing into a crust of ice. The wall, which just yesterday was a difficult but manageable route, has become a death trap. And in the midst of this chaos, disaster strikes. During another attempt to push upward, a hurricane-force gust of wind hits them with incredible power. It catches 2 coils of rope clipped to their anchor and hurls them into the abyss. De Maison and Gusseau watch helplessly as their only link to the world below vanishes into the swirling snow. They're left with just one main rope, the one connecting them. It's like being stranded in the middle of the ocean without a paddle. The way down is cut off, descending their route on such difficult terrain with a single rope, especially in a storm like this, is pure suicide. They are trapped at nearly 4,000 meters on a tiny ledge exposed to all the winds. Their supplies of food and fuel are dwindling fast. Every hour spent here drains their strength. The cold seeps into their bones, stealing their ability to think rationally, and in that moment, René de Maison makes the only possible, desperate decision. There is no going back. The only chance of survival is to go up, to push through the storm, through the ice-plastered rock, through their own exhaustion, toward the summit. Only there, on the ridge, is there any hope of rescue and an easier descent. They keep climbing, but it's no longer a sport. It's a race against time, with their lives on the line. But the wall won't let them go. Every meter is gained with inhuman effort. The storm doesn't let up for a single hour, turning the ascent into torture. Time stretches, days blurring into one endless frozen night. Soon, they run out of the most important thing, fuel. The small gas stove, their only source of warmth, hisses one last time and falls silent. Now they can't get a single drop of water. Dehydration sets in with terrifying speed, sapping their strength even faster than hunger. The body begins to consume itself. Muscles weaken, the mind becomes confused. The young and powerful Serge Goussot is the first to give in. His body, so recently full of energy, refuses to obey. He can no longer move, can't hold an ice axe, can't even stand. He just hangs on the rope like a broken marionette. De Maison, himself on the brink, refuses to abandon him. He tries to haul his partner, setting up complex pulley systems to lift him just one more meter. He screams words of encouragement that are instantly swallowed by the wind, but it's all in vain. His own strength is failing. He knows the battle is lost. On February 21st, the 11th day of their ascent, on a tiny snow-covered ledge where they can barely sit, Serge Goussot goes quiet. He leaves without a word, simply closing his eyes. In that moment, René de Maison's world collapses. He is alone, alone with the hurricane, the cold, and the silent body of his friend. He's tied to him by a single rope and a single fate. He can't unclip from him, can't leave him there. It would be a betrayal. And so, he sits in this frozen tomb, hugging his friend's cooling body for some faint warmth, listening only to the howl of the wind and the beat of his own heart, which feels ready to stop at any second. Another 4 days pass, 4 endless cycles of sunrise and sunset that René can barely distinguish through the curtain of snow. He's no longer fighting, he's just existing. His consciousness fades, replaced by brief flashes of delirium. He talks to Serge, sharing the last crumbs of his thoughts. Time has stopped, but on the 15th day, a miracle happens. For a few hours, the storm loosens its grip. The wind dies down, the clouds part, and through a gap, the sun appears, and with it, a sound, the roar of helicopter blades. In this short weather window, the pilot does the incredible. He brings his machine almost flush with the vertical wall, balancing on the very edge of what's possible. A rescuer is lowered on a winch toward the motionless figure. He sees de Maison, alive but barely breathing, and the body of Goussot. In a matter of minutes, the rescue team manages to secure and lift the utterly exhausted climber on board. He weighs 25 kilograms less than when he started the climb. He's no longer a man, but a shadow of one. He is saved. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it's just beginning. As soon as he's in the hospital and conscious, de Maison makes a shocking announcement. He directly accuses the Chamonix Guides Association. He claims he saw and heard helicopters several days earlier, during windows of clear weather when a rescue would have been possible. He insists the rescue team deliberately delayed their departure, leaving them to die a slow death, all because of an old feud. In response, the authorities and the Guides Association issue an official rebuttal. The weather made flying impossible, and risking the lives of the rescuers would have been pure madness. All of France holds its breath. Newspapers run blazing headlines. The public is split right down the middle. On one side, people believe the lone hero who survived a living hell. On the other, they trust the official story from the well-respected organization. A mountain tragedy turns into a messy public scandal. He's been physically rescued, but the mountain still has its grip on him. He's alive, but a part of his soul is still up there, on that icy ledge with Serge. The public scandal rages on, but for René de Maison, it's all just noise. The real storm is the one raging inside him. To battle it, he picks up a pen. He writes a book, part confession, part indictment. 342 hours on the Grandes Jorasses. Words become his new ice axe, a tool to chip away at the wall of silence and official lies. The book is an instant bestseller. The entire country reads it, completely captivated. Its pages are filled with his truth, his pain, his fury. He describes their agony in detail, hour by agonizing hour, and directly accuses the system of his partner's death. But for a man of action, words are only half the battle. As long as the route remains unclimbed, the summit unconquered, his story isn't finished. For de Maison, this becomes an obsession, a matter of honor. He has to go back. He has to finish what he and Serge started. It sounds insane. To go back to the same wall, at the same time of year, to the very spot where he nearly died and lost his friend. Many people think he's crazy, calling it grandstanding or just plain madness. But de Maison tunes them all out. Exactly 1 year later, in the winter of 1972, he's back at the foot of the Grandes Jorasses. The wall meets him with an icy silence, as if it remembers everything. This time, he has two new trusted partners by his side. They begin the climb. This isn't just an assault on the summit anymore. It's a ritual, a pilgrimage. And this time, the mountain yields. René de Maison reaches the top. He finishes the route. And this new route, this path he fought for, a path wrestled from the very elements. He names it the Gousseau route. It is his final answer to all the critics, a monument to his friend carved not in granite, but into the most challenging face in the Alps. August 18th, 2023. The Italian Dolomites are drenched in sun. The legendary mountaineer, Ermanno Salvaterra, makes a move he's made thousands of times before. He's on a route he knows better than the streets of his own hometown. Every crack, every ledge is familiar. This isn't some expedition to the ends of the earth, no desperate battle with the elements. For a man of his skill, this is practically a walk in his own backyard. But then, something goes wrong. A handhold gives way, and the 68-year-old master falls. To the entire climbing world, the news sounds like an absurd, cruel joke. Ermanno Salvaterra isn't just a name on a list of greats. He has a nickname, the Man of the Torre. He earned it for his incredible ascents of one of the most difficult and dangerous peaks on the planet, Cerro Torre in Patagonia. This isn't just a mountain, it's a granite spire, perpetually under attack by icy storms, a summit that has broken the spirits and careers of dozens of daredevils. But Salvaterra went there again and again, forging new, unimaginable paths, proving that impossible is just a matter of preparation and spirit. He's called a master of tactics, a genius of survival in extreme conditions, a man who knows how to wait, how to read the mountain's signs, and when to retreat, only to come back and conquer. He'd survived weeks in ice caves, endured hurricane-force winds strong enough to blow a truck off a slope. He came back from places people usually don't come back from. And now, the news of his death comes not from distant Patagonia, but from his native Italy on a simple, classic route. Shock and disbelief. That's the first reaction from his friends and colleagues. How? How could the man who conquered Patagonian storms and vertical ice walls fall here, in his home mountains, where everything seems so predictable, so safe? The question hangs in the thin mountain air, demanding an answer. To understand the scale of this loss, you have to travel thousands of kilometers from the sunny Alps to the frozen heart of Patagonia. There, on the border of Argentina and Chile, stands a granite fang that pierces the sky, the peak of Cerro Torre. It's not just a mountain, it's a vertical fortress, constantly besieged by some of the most savage winds on the planet. Its summit is crowned with a giant mushroom of rime ice, which changes shape with every storm and often makes the final step to victory simply impossible. It was here that Ermanno Salvaterra's name became legend. He didn't just conquer this peak, he became synonymous with it. The year is 1985. It's winter in Patagonia, a time when nature isn't just unfriendly, it's hostile to all living things. The days are as short as the flare of a match, the nights an endless frozen abyss. It was in these conditions that Salvaterra and his team did what many considered madness, the first ever winter ascent of Torre. This audacious challenge to the elements wrote his name into history forever. The climb became a benchmark of courage and skill for an entire generation of mountaineers. But for Ermanno, this was only the beginning of his dialogue with the mountain. He returned to Patagonia dozens of times, obsessed with finding new lines up that granite needle. He studied it like a scientist, discovering new routes that were considered pure fantasy before him. And this is where the main paradox lies. This man, who took on such incredible risks, was known in the climbing community as a model of calculation and caution. His friends and partners say that climbing with Salvaterra was like a chess match against the elements, where every move was calculated 10 steps ahead. He never relied on luck. The weather, the ice conditions, the team's well-being, he analyzed everything with the cold precision of a surgeon. His reputation was so flawless that his name became a guarantee of reliability. He was the one who always knew when to turn back before the mountain could have the last word. And so, this man who had stared down the giants of Patagonia wasn't at the edge of the world on that day, August 18th. He was at his day job. He was a mountain guide, and his task was to safely lead a client up one of the most beautiful routes in the Dolomites. Their goal was the summit of Campanile Alto, and their path was the classic Via Hartmann/Kraus route. In the climbing world, that name is like a familiar melody. It's not a wild, unexplored wall, but a popular, time-tested route of moderate difficulty. A route that hundreds, if not thousands of people climb each season. For Salvaterra, this was more than just a job. This was his open-air office, his home. He was born and raised at the foot of these cliffs. He absorbed their character with his mother's milk. They say he could have climbed this route with his eyes closed, navigating by touch, by muscle memory. Every curve of the rock, every convenient hold. It was all like a book he had read 100 times. The weather that day is perfect, no sign of trouble. The sky is clear, the rock is dry and warm from the summer sun. The rope team, he and his client, moves with confidence and coordination. The rhythm of the climb is calm and steady. Breath, movement, the click of a carabiner. From below, they look like two small dots, crawling slowly but surely toward their goal. Everything is going according to plan, completely routine. For a client, being on a rope with Ermanno Salvaterra himself is like riding in a car with the world's best driver. It's an absolute guarantee of safety and professionalism. The time is 1:30 in the afternoon. The sun is high, bathing the rock in warmth. The team is already in the upper part of the route, at an altitude of about 2,750 meters. The summit is close. The most difficult section is behind them. As the leader, Ermanno is climbing first. This is standard practice. The most experienced person forges the path, places protection, and prepares a safe line for the person following. His movements are honed by decades of experience, as fluid and efficient as a dancer's. He is the embodiment of confidence and control. He reaches out to grab the next hold, tests its stability, shifts his weight, a movement he has made 1,000,000 times. And in that exact moment, the unthinkable happens. The rock, which seemed monolithic and eternal, betrays him. The hold, the anchor he was counting on, simply breaks off the wall. A piece of living stone, weakened by millennia of wind and frost, tears loose and falls, taking him with it. In an instant, his world turns upside down. There's no time to scream, no time to think. Just the sudden feeling of emptiness beneath his feet. The man who was always in control of his circumstances is now at their mercy. The rope goes taut, but it's too late. He falls about 20 meters, the height of a 7-story building. A second of free fall that feels like an eternity. And then, a sharp, dull impact against a rock ledge. Everything goes silent. There, in the quiet of the alpine afternoon, on a route that was like a second home to him, the journey of the great man of the Torre comes to an end. An unpredictable, blind accident. The kind that mountains always keep in reserve, even for their most beloved sons. The woman he was guiding is at a belay station below him. The rope is securely anchored. Her life is not in danger. She is the only witness to what happened. She sees her guide's figure disappear over the edge of the rock, hears the scrape of stone, feels the sharp tug on the rope, and then a deafening silence. She calls his name. Once, twice. No answer. Only the echo of her voice, bouncing between the cliffs. Fear gives way to a chilling realization. The irreparable has happened. Her hands are shaking, but she acts with the clarity she was taught. She pulls out her phone and dials the number for the rescue service. The alarm signal echoes through the valley. Within minutes, a yellow rescue helicopter lifts into the sky. Its blades slice through the quiet air as it approaches the scene. The pilot, an experienced mountain ace, brings the machine as close as possible to the vertical wall. A rescuer is lowered on a winch, swinging out over the abyss. A doctor is with him. Their movements are fast and professional, but their eyes already tell the story. They descend to the motionless body, resting on a rock ledge. A few seconds of examination, a check for a pulse. Any hope fades. Over the radio, the doctor delivers a short, terrible verdict. According to preliminary reports, it was all instantaneous. There was no chance. The body of the legendary climber is carefully prepared for evacuation. Carrying its tragic cargo, the helicopter takes Ermanno Salvaterra on his final flight over the home mountains he loved so much, and which so unexpectedly took him away. As the news spreads, no one tries to find blame or question Salvaterra's skill. The verdict is obvious to anyone who has ever been in the mountains: a freak accident. The very definition of objective danger you read about in textbooks. Mountains are living organisms. They breathe, they change, they age. A rock that seemed like a solid anchor yesterday can become a trap today. It's an inherent part of the game, a risk accepted by everyone who ties their life to the heights. In the climbing community, there are no arguments, no investigations, only a shared grief and a bitter understanding. Even the most experienced master may stand no chance against the blind will of nature. But it is this understanding that gives rise to the greatest, most tragic paradox of this story. The man whose name was synonymous with survival in the most hellish conditions imaginable. The man who fought for weeks against the ice storms of Patagonia, where the wind knocks you off your feet and the cold freezes you to the bone. The one who returned a victor from vertical granite walls, where any mistake would have meant death. He met his end not there, at the far edge of the world, in a heroic battle with the elements, but here, in his familiar, almost domestic mountains. On a route that for him was an easy stroll. This cruel irony of fate is profoundly shocking. His passing becomes not just a personal tragedy, but a stark reminder for everyone. A reminder that the mountains do not forgive familiarity. They don't have easy or difficult routes. They only have roots. And on every single one, you must be completely focused. Experience, skill, intuition. All of it improves your chances, but it offers no absolute guarantee. The mountain always has the final say. And on that day, August 18th, 2023, the mountain Campanile Alto spoke its final fateful word to the Torre man. 14,000 feet above the earth, 7 men are standing on a summit where no one has stood before. It's July 14th, 1865, and they've just conquered the Matterhorn, the last great fortress of the Alps, a mountain that had repelled the boldest climbers for years. The expedition leader, an Englishman named Edward Whymper, is looking out at the world from the peak of his dream. He'd spent 4 years fighting for this moment, 4 years of failure, rivalry, and desperate attempts. And now, victory. The air is thin, but the euphoria is even more intoxicating than the altitude. They plant a makeshift flag, their names forever etched into history. Down below, in the Italian camp, his main rival, Jean-Antoine Carrel, sees their silhouettes against the sky and knows the race is lost. For the 7 men on the summit, it is a moment of absolute triumph, but the mountain isn't done with them yet. Barely an hour passes. Euphoria gives way to extreme concentration. The descent is always more dangerous than the climb. They're roped together, moving step by step, along a ridge as sharp as a razor's edge. The most experienced guide, Michel Croz, leads the way, followed by the young and daring Lord Francis Douglas. The order of the rope has been meticulously planned. Each man trusts his life to the others, and then the unthinkable happens. One of the climbers slips, a cry swallowed by the clatter of falling rocks. A sudden jolt. The rope snaps taut like a bowstring, pulling one man after another off the mountain. 4 men are plummeting into an abyss over 4,000 feet deep. In that instant, Edward Whymper and the 2 remaining guides, the Taugwalders, father and son, press themselves in terror against the icy slope. The entire weight of the falling bodies slams against their rope. They hold on with all their might, bracing for the inevitable. But then, suddenly, the tension goes slack. A deafening silence falls, broken only by the whistle of the wind. Whymper looks at the rope. It had snapped. The thin, spare rope connecting the last man to fall and the first survivor had broken. Its frayed end swings lifelessly just a few feet away from him. 4 lives gone in the void. In the space of an hour, the greatest triumph in the history of mountaineering had become its darkest chapter. To understand how 7 brave men found themselves on that summit, and why their descent turned into a nightmare, we have to go back to the beginning of this story. At its heart is Edward Whymper. He wasn't a professional guide, nor an aristocrat looking for thrills. Whymper was an artist and an engraver who'd come to the Alps to capture their majesty. He sketched glaciers, valleys, and peaks. But one mountain captured his imagination, becoming a true obsession: the Matterhorn. In the mid-19th century, it was the last great unconquered peak in the Alps. To the locals, it was a cursed mountain, home to spirits. For climbers, it was the impossible challenge, a granite fang piercing the sky. Its sheer faces seemed absolutely insurmountable. Starting in 1861, Whymper assaulted the mountain again and again. 7 attempts, 7 failures. He tried different routes, hired different guides, but the mountain threw him back every time. It tested his limits, turning a passion into a lifelong obsession. But he wasn't alone in his obsession. His chief rival was Jean-Antoine Carrel, the best guide in the valley, a man who knew the Matterhorn like the back of his hand. They had once been partners, but now their paths had diverged. Their rivalry was more than just a competition between 2 climbers. It was an unspoken contest between Britain and Italy. Whoever planted their flag on the summit first would be immortalized in history. July 1865. The tension is at its peak. Whymper is in the village at the foot of the mountain when news hits him like a thunderclap. Carrel and his team have already set off for the summit. They're taking the Italian ridge, which was believed to be the only possible route. Whymper is out of time. All his plans are in ruins. The best guides have gone with Carrel. He realizes it's now or never. He needs to throw together a new team from whoever is available, find a new, unexplored route from the Swiss side, and beat the Italians. The race for the Matterhorn was entering its final, most desperate phase. Time was against Whymper. Carrel was already out there, somewhere on the Italian slope, clawing his way to the top. Whymper had to improvise, and he made the riskiest decision of his life. He would attempt the Hernley Ridge on the Swiss side, the very same ridge that everyone, including himself, had considered utterly impassable. It was a complete gamble, a leap into the unknown. But he had no other choice. He desperately searched for guides and found the Swiss father and son team of Peter Taugwalder and his son in a nearby village. They agreed, and then fate dealt him an unexpected hand, one that at first seemed like a stroke of luck. At his hotel, he met another group of Britons who were also planning an ascent. They were led by Charles Hudson, one of the strongest climbers of his day, accompanied by the experienced Chamonix guide, Michel Croz. They decided to join forces. Now they were a formidable team, ready to take on any challenge. The young aristocrat, Lord Francis Douglas, was also with them. But there was one more member whose presence raised questions: the 19-year-old Douglas Haddo. He was a friend of Hudson's, energetic and full of enthusiasm. But he had one critical flaw. He had almost no rock climbing experience. He was skilled on glaciers, but the sheer cliffs of the Matterhorn were on another level entirely. In the rush and excitement of the race, this detail was overlooked. It was assumed the experience of Hudson and Croz would be enough for everyone. The team of 7, assembled in just a few hours, was ready for the assault. They had no way of knowing that Carrel, on the opposite slope, was moving slowly, cutting steps in the ice. And their own untested route up the Hernley Ridge turned out to be surprisingly straightforward. They climbed quickly, exceeding all expectations. It was as if the mountain, after years of resistance, was finally letting them pass. But this deceptive ease concealed a hidden danger. At this altitude, every step demands perfect technique and endurance. And one inexperienced member on a rope is like a weak link in a chain, ready to break at the worst possible moment. The decision to bring Haddo on this deadly game would become Whymper's greatest mistake, a mistake whose price would be unimaginably high. July 14th, 1:40 in the afternoon. The final step. And that was it. Silence. Years of struggle, 7 failed attempts, despair, and hope. It all converged at this single point, on a tiny patch of rock surrounded by the void. They had done it. The last-minute team, thrown together in a hurry, was standing on the summit of the impregnable Matterhorn. The ascent up the unknown Hernley Ridge had been astonishingly easy, as if the mountain, tired of their persistence, had finally surrendered. Edward Whymper isn't looking at the panorama of the Alps. His eyes are scanning the Italian slope, and he finds them. Far, far below, almost 1,000 feet down, he sees tiny dots crawling slowly upward. It's Jean-Antoine Carrel and his men. The race was over. Whymper and the guide Croz, without a word, start shouting and rolling stones down the mountain to get their rivals' attention, to show them they were too late. Victory is intoxicating. They spend a full hour on the summit, an unprecedented amount of time. They aren't rushing, they're savoring a moment that had already made history. Michel Croz unties a flag from his pack, and they plant it at the highest point. They write their names on a scrap of paper, place it in a bottle, and leave it among the rocks, a message for future generations. The euphoria erases all sense of danger. The climb was easy, the weather is perfect, the team is strong. What could possibly go wrong? It was the calm before a storm that none of them could see coming. They felt like masters of the mountain, victors to whom anything was now possible. Towards 4 in the afternoon, they begin to prepare for the descent. The sun is still high, spirits are up. They rope themselves together, confident that the hardest part is behind them. All that's left is to carefully make their way down and accept the congratulations in the village below. Michael Croz leads the rope, with the inexperienced Douglas Haddo placed right behind him. The logic was simple. The best climber should be in front to secure the novice. Behind them are Charles Hudson and Lord Francis Douglas, with Whymper and the 2 Swiss guides bringing up the rear. Filled with confidence, they begin their journey down into history, never suspecting that for 4 of them, this would be their last descent. The euphoria of the summit evaporates with every downward step. Now, the main challenge is concentration. Descending sheer rock faces requires as much, if not more, skill than climbing up. Every ledge, every crack is a foothold on which a life depends. Roped together, they move as a single organism. As he should, the guide Michel Croz goes first. He places his feet with confidence, testing every rock, his back to the others. He is their living anchor. Right behind him, on the shortest length of rope, is Douglas Haddo. Croz keeps looking back, telling him where to place his feet. Haddo's technique, honed on glaciers, is failing him here on the bare rock. He's clumsy, his movements lack confidence. And then, it happens. The section isn't the most difficult, but it demands total focus. There's a scrape of a boot on rock, a sound that makes a climber's blood run cold. Haddo loses his footing. His leg slips. In a desperate attempt to catch himself, he falls forward, crashing directly into the back of Michel Croz in front of him. The powerful impact knocks even the most experienced guide off his feet. Croz shouts, his ice axe flying from his hands. The 2 men, tangled together, peel away from the rock face. The rope yanks taut with the force of a catapult. The next man on the rope, Charles Hudson, has no time to react. He's plucked from the cliff. After him, Lord Francis Douglas. 4 men are flying into the abyss. For a moment, they hang on the rope. The entire unimaginable weight falls on a single link, the thin, old cord connecting Douglas to the guide Peter Taugwalder behind him. There is a dry, sharp crack, like the snap of a whip. The rope breaks. A deafening silence falls. 4 silhouettes, who just moments ago were men full of life and triumph, silently vanish into the 4,000-foot abyss. Above them, on the slope, 3 men remain. Edward Whymper and the Taugwalder guides, a father and son. They're frozen, pressed against the rock face, staring at a frayed piece of rope swinging rhythmically over the abyss. Just an hour ago, this was a moment of triumph. Now, there's only ice-cold horror and a hollow emptiness that swallowed the screams of their companions. Ahead of them lies an impossibly difficult descent. Just the 3 of them, carrying the knowledge that they are the only ones who survived to tell the tale. The news of the tragedy hits Zermatt, and then all of Europe like an avalanche. Victorian society is reeling. Instead of celebrating what should have been the greatest mountaineering achievement of the age, newspaper headlines are filled with horror. Even Queen Victoria herself considers an outright ban on mountaineering, dismissing it as a pointless and dangerous hobby. An official investigation gets underway, with dozens of witnesses, grueling interrogations, and expert analysis. The verdict is predictable: an accident caused by the fall of an inexperienced climber. But nobody is satisfied with that official explanation, because a key silent witness remains: that shredded piece of rope. It's found on the body of one of the fallen climbers, and that's when a horrifying detail emerges. This wasn't the main sturdy climbing rope. It was a thin, spare cord, something they'd brought along just in case. So, why was this the rope used at the most crucial point in the chain, between the fourth and fifth man? It's a question that sparks a storm of rumors and speculation, rumors that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. Edward Whymper returns to England both a hero and a pariah. He writes a book about the ordeal, one that will become a classic of mountaineering literature. In its pages, he lays out a detailed account of the ascent and the disaster. He places the blame squarely on the inexperience of Douglas Haddo, whose slip, he claims, triggered the fatal chain reaction. In doing so, Whymper protects his own reputation and establishes the official, accepted version of the story. He won his race, he conquered his mountain, but the shadow of the Matterhorn, the shadow of that severed rope, would follow him for the rest of his days. It would forever turn his greatest triumph into a permanent reminder of the price he paid to reach the summit. April 28, 2011. A day of celebration. The legendary mountaineer, the man mountain Erhard Loretan, is celebrating his 52nd birthday, and he's spending it exactly where he belongs, on top of the world, under a vast blue sky. Today, his journey isn't to the Himalayan giants, but to a familiar peak back home, the Grünhorn in the Swiss Alps. This isn't some extreme expedition. It's more of a birthday stroll. Beside him is his partner. They're roped together, moving along a straightforward snowy ridge. The sun floods the slopes with a blinding light. The air is crisp and clear, and the perfect spring snow crunches under their feet. It's as if nature itself is celebrating with him. Erhard Loretan, a name etched into the history of mountaineering. He was the third person on the planet to conquer all 14 of the 8,000ers, many of them in a revolutionary alpine style, fast, light, and without supplemental oxygen. He had stared down storms on Annapurna, spent nights in ice caves on Everest, and survived where human life seems like a statistical error. His instincts were honed by thousands of hours at the very edge of what's possible. For him, this cozy alpine ridge is like his own backyard, familiar, predictable, and completely safe. But the mountains don't forgive even a moment of complacency. One wrong step, a single moment of lost balance on a deceptively simple slope. In a split second, the taut rope pulls his partner off the ridge with him. A few hours later, Loretan's name would indeed be in headlines all over the world. But they wouldn't be about a new record or another incredible achievement. They would report a fall from a height of 200 meters. The greatest mountaineer of his generation, a man who had outsmarted the deadliest peaks on the planet, met his end on his home mountain on his birthday. This is a story about the cruel irony of fate that lies in wait for those who dare to challenge the elements. To understand the sheer scale of this man, we have to go back to the 80s, the golden era of Himalayan mountaineering. Back then, climbing an 8,000er was like a military operation. Huge teams, tons of gear, months-long sieges, with climbers slowly, step by step, forging a path to the summit, setting up a series of camps along the way. It was a war of attrition where victory belonged to those with the most resources and patience. And onto this stage steps Erhard Loretan. He's a rebel by nature, a man who looks at these cumbersome expeditions and just sees inefficiency. He feels there has to be another way. His name goes down in history as the third person to summit all 14 of the world's highest peaks, and the second to do it without supplemental oxygen, following in the footsteps of the great Reinhold Messner. But the raw numbers and records don't capture the essence of his genius. Loretan became famous for his revolutionary style, one that would change the game at high altitude forever. Together with his friend and partner, Jean Toilet, he created a daring tactic they called night naked. It's a metaphor, of course. It was about climbing light, shedding everything non-essential, heavy packs, food supplies, oxygen tanks. And the key element was the night. During the day, the Himalayan sun turns snowy slopes into an unstable mess, triggering avalanches. But at night, the mountain sleeps. The frost binds the snow and ice, making the route much safer. Loretan and Troillet would set out for the summit under the cover of darkness, moving at incredible speeds. Minimal gear meant maximum mobility. Instead of a months-long siege, it was a lightning-fast push over 1 or 2 days. They weren't assaulting the mountain. They were slipping past its dangers while it slept. It was a style built on phenomenal endurance, intuition, and absolute trust in each other. And this audacious style demanded the biggest stage, a true final exam. In 1986, Loretan and Troillet founded the North Face of Everest. They chose a route that wasn't just difficult, but almost mythical. The Hornbein Supercouloir. Picture a narrow, steep gully of ice, hanging at an altitude of 8,000 meters. It's a natural death trap, a channel for avalanches and rockfall that thunder down during the day. Most climbers considered this route impossible in a lightweight style. A traditional expedition would have spent weeks fixing ropes and setting up camps in this ice corridor. But Loretan and Troillet had a different plan. They set off at night with only the bare essentials and tiny backpacks. No ropes, no tent, no oxygen. They weren't walking. They were practically running up the ice slope, guided by the beams of their headlamps. Their strategy was to outrun the danger. And the result? The ascent to the summit and the descent back to base camp took them just 43 hours. That time frame sounds like a typo. An entire Everest expedition compressed into less than 2 days. How did they pull it off? On a climb like this, there's no room for rest. When their energy failed them, they didn't pitch a camp. They would just stop, drive their ice axes into the slope, lean back to back, and fall asleep for a few minutes standing up, in the middle of the icy silence. Their sleep was a quick system reboot, after which they would push upwards again. And on the way down, exhausted, they did something unthinkable. They basically slid down the couloir, risking losing control at any second. This achievement forever changed what was thought to be possible. Loretan proved that the human body is capable of the incredible, and that at extreme altitude, speed is the new form of safety. The mountain can't catch you if you move like a ghost. Having conquered all the giants of the planet, Erhard Loretan came down from the heavens, both literally and figuratively. He returned to Switzerland, trading the thin air of the Himalayas for the cozy landscapes of his native Alps. The great assaults were in the past. He was now a professional mountain guide. The man who had walked the edge of the world was now guiding everyday people, showing them the beauty and majesty of the mountains. He shared his experience, his passion, his philosophy. His life seemed to find a new, calmer, more measured rhythm. He had achieved everything a climber could dream of: fame, recognition, a place in history. But the darkest abyss of his life was not waiting for him on an icy slope. In 2001, the unthinkable happened. A single moment, a careless movement born of fatigue and desperation, led to an unbearable family tragedy. The man whose reflexes and self-control had been perfected in the most extreme conditions on Earth made a fatal mistake in a domestic situation. He became the cause of his own 7-month-old son's death. The story shocked all of Switzerland. The world, which had seen him as a Superman, now saw a broken father. The trial became a public ordeal. Loretan didn't try to make excuses. He spoke honestly about what happened and admitted his guilt. The court gave him a suspended sentence, but he had already delivered the harshest verdict upon himself. It was a burden he would carry in his soul until the very end. The mountains, which were once his arena for records and self-affirmation, now became his only sanctuary, a place where he could be alone with his pain. And so, in 2011, he planned a simple climb, not for glory, but to celebrate a birthday in the one place his soul could still find peace. So, April 28th, 2011, the summit of the Grünhorn, 4,044 meters of beauty in the heart of the Bernese Alps. This isn't some lifeless rock spire in the Himalayas. This is his home turf. The route he chose for his birthday follows a sharp snow and ice ridge. For a climber of Loretan's caliber, it's not a technically difficult path. He'd done it dozens of times. He knew every rock, every crevasse. This was territory where he felt completely confident, where he was the master of the situation. Today, he's a guide once again. He's leading his only client. But 38-year-old Xenia Minder is more than just a client. She is his life partner, his rock during his darkest years. This climb isn't a job, it's their celebration, their escape from the world, their moment of connection with the element they both love. The weather is perfect, the sky is clear, the sun is bright but not scorching, and the wind is barely a whisper. An ideal day for a climb, the kind that stays in your memory forever. They are roped together, the short line between them, a symbol of trust and a shared fate. Their movements are in sync, honed by hundreds of hours spent together in the mountains. Step by step, they ascend with confidence. Below them, a panorama of alpine peaks unfolds, bathed in light. The air grows thinner, but for Loretan, this is his element. Here, he feels alive. The summit is close now. It feels like just one more short push, and the goal will be reached. An atmosphere of complete calm and harmony surrounds them. In this moment, there is no past with its heavy burden, no future. There is only this ridge, this sky, and the person beside him, sharing this journey. An altitude of 3,800 meters. The summit is within arm's reach. That treacherous moment when the goal is in sight and concentration can waver for just a split second. One step, another, and then a break in the perfect rhythm. According to the investigation, Xenia, climbing behind him, loses her footing. Perhaps her foot slipped on a patch of treacherous ice hidden by snow. It happens in an instant. In mountaineering, there is no time to think. Loretan, leading the way, feels a sudden, brutal jerk. The short safety rope, which moments before was a thread of trust, becomes a steel cable pulling him into the abyss. His instincts, honed on the world's most dangerous faces, scream at him what to do. Slam his ice axe into the slope, press his body into it, become one with the mountain. But they are on a ridge as narrow as a knife's edge. There's no purchase, no room to maneuver, no life-saving split second. The force of the pull is irresistible. It plucks him from the ridge like an autumn leaf from a branch. The man who had cheated gravity dozens of times at 8,000 meters is powerless against its relentless law, here, in his home Alps. The world turns upside down. The blue sky and white slopes blur into a swift, dizzying kaleidoscope. A fall. 200 meters down, a steep, icy slope. It's an uncontrollable slide. There's nothing to hold onto, nowhere to get a grip. Every outcropping of rock, every shard of ice, only accelerates the plunge. Two figures tied together by a single rope, hurtling toward the bottom of the ridge. A celebratory climb comes to an abrupt end in the silence of the alpine morning. The silence isn't broken by the roar of an avalanche or the howl of the wind. It's shattered by a human scream. Another climber, further down the slope, becomes an accidental witness. He sees something no one was ever meant to see. Two dark figures sliding down the vast white slope. With trembling hands, he pulls out his radio. A call for help goes out to the valley below. In Switzerland, the rescue services run like clockwork. Within minutes, a red dot appears in the sky. A helicopter, growing rapidly as it closes in on the scene of the tragedy. The rescue team, these are people who've seen the worst of it. They descend onto the slope, their movements precise and professional. But here, at the bottom of the ridge, there's no one to save. The hope that flew in with them evaporates in the thin air. All they can do is confirm the inevitable. Erhard Loretan, a true legend, a man who had summited all 14 8,000ers, and his partner, Xenia Minder, were killed on impact. The official investigation doesn't take long. The verdict is simple and predictable, a tragic accident. The news spreads around the world like an avalanche, and the entire mountaineering world is left in shock. This isn't just news of a great athlete's death. It's a story laced with an irony so brutal, it's hard to believe. The man who'd spent a night standing up in an ice couloir on Everest, who had survived the storms on Kangchenjunga, and descended from K2 at the absolute limit of human endurance, met his end on a familiar peak, one practically in his own backyard. He wasn't claimed by the merciless giants of the Himalayas. He wasn't swallowed by a treacherous crevasse. He was brought down by a scenario familiar to any mountain guide. A partner's slip, the the sudden tension on the rope, and the simple, unforgiving law of physics, which proved to be stronger than the most iron will. May 29, 2009. The Alps are greeting the day in their finest attire. The snow-white peaks of the Mont Blanc Massif are piercing a flawless blue sky. The air is crystal clear, crisp, and perfectly still. Not a single cloud in sight. It's the kind of weather mountaineers dream of. Perfect conditions for an ascent on one of the most scenic routes, the Géant Glacier, part of the famous Vallée Blanche. It seems as if nature itself is smiling on the bold today. A small group is moving across the dazzling snowfield. 3 people, roped together. The guide is in the lead, her steps measured and precise. Behind her, at a safe distance, follow her 2 clients. The rhythmic crunch of crampons on the snow is the only sound breaking the majestic silence. An otherworldly landscape unfolds around them, an ice kingdom that is both alluring and terrifying. But today, there is no fear. There is only the confidence that radiates from their guide. Her every gesture, every movement speaks of immense experience. She knows these mountains like the back of her hand. They are walking across a snow bridge, a treacherous formation that conceals a deep glacial crevasse below. From the surface, it looks like a solid part of the terrain, monolithic and strong. But it's just an illusion, a thin crust of compacted snow over a bottomless void. In an instant, without a single crack or a warning sign, that illusion shatters. The ground gives way. The world vanishes from beneath their feet. A sudden jolt on the rope, and all 3 of them are falling. The calm of the perfect morning is replaced by an abrupt, deafening silence. They plummet down an icy shaft, 20 meters deep, the height of a 7-story building. A fall into a narrow, dark abyss where the walls are ancient, compressed ice. When rescuers arrive on the scene, the news of the tragedy will sweep across France, sending a wave of shock through the nation. And it's not just about the accident itself. On that day, in an icy crevasse on Mont Blanc, the life of more than just an experienced guide will be cut short. The victim will turn out to be a national hero, an icon, one of the greatest athletes in history, a queen for whom the mountains were both a throne and her destiny. The guide's name was Karina Ruby. For France, her name is the symbol of an entire era, a byword for victory and an unbreakable spirit. Her story isn't just the journey of an athlete, it's a true legend forged on the icy slopes. Back in 1998, in Nagano, Japan, when snowboarding made its grand debut in the Olympic program, she was the one to claim the first historic gold. Karine Ruby became the first ever Olympic snowboarding champion, etching her name into the annals of world sport. That moment made her an instant celebrity, an icon for millions. At home, she earned the enduring nickname, the Queen of Snowboarding. And this wasn't just some clever headline from a journalist. It was a statement of fact. 6 world championship titles, 68 World Cup victories, 2 Olympic medals, 1 gold, 1 silver. She collected victories with a terrifying ease. It seemed there was no limit to her talent. She was a force of nature in a brightly colored snowsuit. And then, in 2006, at the absolute peak of her career, after winning silver in Turin, she did something no one expected. At the age of 31, she announced her retirement. Fans and sponsors were baffled. Why walk away when you're the best? But Karine was already looking further, higher. Instead of magazine covers, endorsement deals, and the comfortable life of a media personality, she chose an ice axe and a rope. She enrolled in the National School of Skiing and Alpinism in Chamonix, the most prestigious mountain guide school in the world. She wasn't seeking fame, she was searching for authenticity. Her goal was no longer to conquer peaks for records, but to open them up for others, to share the feeling of freedom and exhilaration the mountains had given her throughout her life. She traded the podium for the mountain trail, her gold medal for a set of carabiners. Training in Chamonix is a grueling test for even the strongest. They don't give you a pass for past achievements. An Olympic gold medal won't help you survive in a crevasse or set up a proper belay. Karine tackled this challenge with the same determination that had taken her to the top of her sport. And by 2009, she had become what she dreamed of being, a fully certified, top-tier mountain guide. It was the ultimate mark of quality, a recognition of her skill not on a race course, but in the harsh reality of the real mountains. That day, May 29th, began for her like any other workday. She was leading clients on an acclimatization trek, a standard procedure before more serious climbs. The goal was to get used to the altitude, check the gear, and assess the group's condition. It was a routine she had performed dozens of times. They are at an altitude of about 3,300 meters, on a route across the Géant Glacier. This is a classic, you could even say, tourist path, trodden by thousands of climbers. It's not considered extreme or particularly dangerous, especially in such perfect weather. In her rope team are two men, her clients. One is 38, the other 27. They are roped together. This is the ABC of mountaineering, the most basic safety rule on a glacier. That rope is their shared lifeline. If one person falls, the others have to hold the line. Karine, as the most experienced member, is leading the way, breaking the trail, and evaluating every step. She is their guarantee of safety, their eyes and ears in this dazzling white world. A profound calm reigns all around. The weather, as we know, is flawless. The terrain presents no difficulty for a guide of her level. Nothing suggests disaster. It's one of those moments when the mountains seem kind and welcoming. But it's in moments like these that they deliver their most treacherous blow, when your vigilance is lulled by the beauty and confidence borders on serenity. And it's into this perfect picture that an invisible threat, hidden beneath a thin layer of snow, intrudes. They move forward, meter by meter. Karina is leading the team across what appears to be a flat, snowy plateau. But beneath this white blanket lies the complex terrain of the glacier. A glacier isn't a static block of ice. It's a slow but mighty river, constantly moving, cracking, and forming deep crevasses. In winter, these cracks get filled with snow, which over time compacts to form what are known as snow bridges. These are natural crossings, and without them, travel on many glaciers would be impossible. The entire art of alpinism is built on the ability to read these signs and trust your experience when crossing them. But it's late May. The spring sun has been generously warming the Alps for weeks. Slowly but surely, it's been weakening winter's grip. The snow becomes wet, heavy, its structure changing. Snow bridges that could support the weight of a small truck in winter turn into fragile, unpredictable traps in the spring. Their reliability is always a lottery, even for the most experienced guide. It's practically impossible to assess the thickness and strength of such a bridge with 100% certainty. At that fatal moment, when Karine and her two clients find themselves on one of these bridges at the same time, the thing every mountaineer fears happens. The breaking point is reached. The structure, weakened by the spring warmth, cannot withstand the combined weight of three people. A sudden, almost silent collapse. There is no groan, no warning crack. The ground simply opens up beneath them. They don't have a second, not even a fraction of a second, to react. No one has time to scream, to step back, to try and dig in with an ice axe. The rope, which was supposed to be their salvation, plays a cruel trick. It keeps them together, but it can't save them from the fall. It pulls them all down as a single unit. The entire rope team vanishes into the blue, icy darkness. And then, silence. On the surface of the glacier, where three figures stood just moments before, there is now a jagged hole in the snow, leading to an icy underworld. But the mountains are rarely completely empty, especially on such a beautiful day. The incident is spotted by another group of climbers, a safe distance away. For them, it's a shocking sight. The people who were walking ahead of them simply vanished into thin air. They immediately understand what's happened. There's no time for panic. One of them pulls out a radio and contacts the rescue service. The distress call flies from 3,000 meters down into the valley to the headquarters of the Chamonix Mountain Gendarmerie. The clock begins its merciless countdown. In the mountains, every minute counts. The rescue operation unfolds with lightning speed. The Chamonix Gendarmerie is an elite unit, and their job is to pull people from the clutches of the mountains. A red helicopter lifts into the air and, within minutes, is hovering over the scene of the tragedy. The roar of its blades shatters the silence that had fallen after the fall. Rescuers are winched down onto the glacier. Their task is to reach the victims as quickly as possible. One of the rescuers, secured by ropes, begins his descent into the narrow, dark crevasse. 20 meters down, into the realm of eternal ice. Each meter takes him deeper into the cold and the dark. At the bottom, among the debris of snow and ice, he finds the three of them. The scene is tragic. The chances of surviving a fall like that, buried under tons of snow, are virtually zero. Corinne Ruby, who was leading, and the 38-year-old client in the middle of the rope show no signs of life. They are buried under blocks of snow that collapsed with them. But a miracle does happen. The third member, the 27-year-old man who was last on the rope, is alive. He is conscious but has suffered very serious injuries. It is he, the sole survivor, who will later be able to tell the story of what happened. The rescue operation shifts to an evacuation. The survivor is carefully lifted to the surface and immediately flown by helicopter to the hospital in the valley. Doctors fight for his life, and they succeed in saving him. He becomes the only witness to the final moments before the fall, but his account only confirms what was already obvious. It all happened suddenly, without the slightest warning. At the same time, an investigation is launched, conducted by experienced investigators from the mountain gendarmerie. They interview eyewitnesses, analyze the route, the snow conditions, the gear. But the conclusion comes swiftly, and it's clear-cut: a tragic accident. They find no fault in Corinne Ruby's actions, not a single mistake. She was leading her group on a standard, well-known route and followed every safety protocol to the letter. The gear was in perfect condition, and the rope setup was flawless. It was one of those rare, terrifying cases where a fatal set of circumstances simply proves stronger than experience, knowledge, and intuition. Simply put, on that day, in that place, the one fatally weakened snow bridge was right there, right under their feet. The news of Corinne Ruby's death hits France like an avalanche. Every TV channel carries the story. Newspapers run her portrait on the front page. It's a national tragedy. The shockwaves are felt not just in France, but throughout the entire global sports community. The nation's president issues an official statement, offering his condolences to her family and calling Corinne a source of national pride. People can't believe that the queen of snowboarding, the woman who seemed invincible, is gone so suddenly. Her death on a seemingly simple route becomes a cruel and sobering lesson. It serves as a brutal reminder that in the mountains, absolute safety simply doesn't exist. There are objective, uncontrollable risks, and in the face of them, everyone is equal, from the novice to the greatest champion. On that day, the mountains she loved so dearly, the mountains she dedicated her entire life to, claimed her forever, teaching one final, most brutal lesson.